Welcome to Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Today, join our Birding with Extension team and guest Annie Ferral, a biologist with the National Wild Turkey Federation, as we discuss wild turkey conservation and get into the holiday spirit. Hope you enjoy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cup Chat with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We have been busy and back. We have gotten back from Rio Grande Birding Festival and had a booth there, and it was awesome to see everybody who tunes in. So make sure you're commenting if you are watching with your county or state. That way we know who all's jumped on this morning and we can see you. So today we have Annie Ferral with the Wild Turkey Federation, or the National Turkey Federation. Let me get that one right.
National Wild Turkey Federation.
National Wild Turkey Federation. And so in the holiday spirit, I think Liz is ready for the holidays.
I am. If we haven't guessed, I very much enjoy my holidays. I like to theme things around the holidays. So since it's Thanksgiving next week, which I completely forgot that next week was Thanksgiving, my husband had to remind me. I figured we would talk all about turkeys today.
Well, I picked up, I know this isn't under your purview, Annie, but I did pick up over like 1,000, over like 300, 600. There's a bunch. Maybe it was 1,000. Maybe I had five. There was over 1,000, but I had 500 turkey poults in my car for 4-H and FFA kids the other day, and they are quite loud, and they don't necessarily smell the best. So I really would never want a wild turkey in my car. But anyways, Annie, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the National Wild Turkey Federation this morning.
That's a lot of turkey poults in one vehicle. So I can't even imagine.
It's a lot. It was a very lot, and they were very loud. I had a headache by the time I got home. And the worst part, and this probably is not kosher to say, but it was so nice. Like, I would call people on the phone, and when I was talking, they would chirp, chirp, chirp. But when someone else started talking, they would kind of quiet down, like they were almost scared. So I just stayed on the phone the whole drive. I was like, who can I call next?
Good to know if I'm ever transporting that many turkeys.
Yes. I provide lots of helpful tips.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So I'm Annie Ferral. I'm a district biologist with the National Wild Turkey Federation. I've been with the Federation for almost 7 years now. I am based in East Texas, in Lindale, just north of Tyler, but I cover Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. So I help manage all of the conservation programs in those 4 states, doing habitat management projects. We have our super fund, which is the funds that come from our hunting heritage banquets. We help allocate those budgets and set up those kind of projects, and manage all of our partnerships with all of our conservation partners, and coordinate with volunteers and that kind of stuff.
So you're very busy, very, very busy.
There's definitely never a dull day.
Well, that's good. Okay, so for those of our listeners who haven't heard of National Wild Turkey Federation, so can you give a little bit background, what it is, when was it founded, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, and so NWTF is a 501c3 nonprofit, conservation nonprofit. We're a grassroots organization, volunteer-based, that has the mission that we're dedicated to the conservation of the wild turkey and preservation of our hunting heritage. And we were founded in 1973. So this year is our big 50th anniversary celebration. So there's been a lot of big events going on, big projects, big goals for the year. We had our 50th anniversary convention. We have an annual convention in Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Opryland Hotel. And so that was like the big golden celebration in Nashville. It was so good to see everybody as record numbers. We had over 60,000 people come, and it was insane. So it's been a big year for us. We're really celebrating why we were founded and where we're going the next 50 years. So we were founded in 1973 to provide that foundation for wild turkey conservation in North America, because at the time, turkey populations were less than 1 million across the country. And so NWTF was founded. We came in, we helped in partnership with our state agency partners, help to restore the wild turkey numbers across the country from that less than 1 million to nearly 7 million. And so since 1973, we have also invested over $500 million into wildlife conservation across the country, and we've conserved or enhanced over 22 million acres of critical wildlife habitat across the country. So that's pretty huge. Big things to celebrate this year. Currently, we have like 226,000 members across the country, representing all 50 states, plus Canada, Mexico, and other various foreign countries. So it's a big year for NWTF. We're celebrating why we were founded, and then we're also looking to the future. How can we continue this kind of success over the next 50 years?
Wow. That's neat. Can we talk a little bit about, and I know always go off the rope from our planned questions, but talk a little bit about kind of the initiatives other than maybe just general conservation work and education, because anything we do takes a little bit of general conservation work and general education that y'all have allowed y'all to meet that stride and that growth in population over these last 50 years.
Yeah, so back when we were founded, we were doing a lot of trap and transfer kind of projects where states were trading birds for bighorn sheep, for fish species. Like there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. Like, we need this, you have this, we have turkeys, you need those, so let's trade. And NWTF is there to help facilitate that and do everything based on the science and the research that we had at the time. And so by doing all those, looking at suitable habitat, kind of doing everything based on the science of the bird itself, we were able to bring that population back up. And so lately, we have been seeing these declines across the Southeast, and it now trickling into like the Great Plains states. So there's a lot of, we're in the past, we've invested a lot in research, and there was kind of a break where we weren't really investing in research. And then now it's like, okay, we really need to invest in more research because we are seeing these declines. No one really knows why. There's not one single silver bullet that's going to fix it. So there's been a ton of research over the last few years. Every year, the National Wild Turkey Federation also co-hosts a wild turkey symposium with a state agency. So we had one last year. It's usually every 5 years. We had one last year in Asheville, North Carolina, co-hosted with the North Carolina Wildlife Resort, whatever DNR. And so it was there, and then we decided to fast track it this time. So the next one's going to be in 2025 in Kansas City. So very soon after our last one, because there is so much research going on right now. So hoping to continue those strides that we made in the last 50 years into the next 50 years to make sure that wild turkey are still around for the younger generations.
So you've touched on research quite a bit. So what are some of the research projects that y'all are currently doing or funding?
Or just share the cool ones. We don't need all of them. Just share the cool ones.
Just some of the highlights. Some of the highlights.
No, there's a ton going on right now. And so I've hit on that because it is kind of one of the top priorities right now. All 4 of my states are funding research projects in their states with their state super funds. So the folks that are going to hunting heritage banquets can know that their money is going to a good place and going to fund these research projects. The NWTF headquarters has a national request for proposals for research now over the last 2 years. And so because everyone's so concerned about these declines, there's so much research going on, headquarters decided to invest funds. Our national board of directors voted to approve all of these projects. So over the last 12 months between the RFP last year and this year, we've invested over $1.2 million in wild turkey research. And that comes with over $9 or $10 million in partner match. So there's a big investment going into research right now. And so in 2023 was our single largest investment in the history of NWTF at $582,000 just over the summer to 10 new projects across 10 states. And so a good example of a project right now that we're funding in this area would be, we have a distribution level health assessment of Rio Grande wild turkeys, and the project is being led by Texas Tech University and is covering Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. And so there's going to be collaboration among 7+ universities that are all doing their own independent studies, but it's so cool to see everybody working together now. Whereas, before it might have been like a cool research project here, a cool research project here, but everyone is collaborating and like there's this sense of community. Everybody is working together to get to these answers. And so for this study, these folks are all going to be collecting disease samples as they're doing their own trapping for their own projects. So we can see what kind of effects and impacts disease is having on the health of Rio Grande wild turkeys. So that's one of the projects that was funded. Another project kind of in our area is a wild turkey population ecology monitoring project through Oklahoma State University. They're looking at, it's a big 5-year study that they're looking to understand the decline of wild turkeys. Oklahoma's seen a pretty drastic decline over the last 5 years or so. So that big project, there's also a project in Nebraska through the University of Nebraska-Lincoln looking at the spatial distribution of potential wild turkey nest predators. So that's another key that folks are looking at in their research. We have one in Wisconsin looking at eastern wild turkey recruitment metrics and poult survival. There's a big one that's starting this year in Kansas through Kansas State University looking at wild turkey poult foraging ecology and nutrient availability. There's a big one in Mississippi that they're looking for novel approaches to estimating wild turkey population parameters. So there is all kinds of different things going on. And you can also find all this information on nwtf.org, our website. If you go in and search for research, there's a bunch of articles. There's actually podcasts that are associated with each of these research projects as well, of our NWTF staff interviewing the principal investigators of each project. So if anybody's curious about any one project in particular, they can go listen to the podcast and the actual researcher that's doing the research. So yeah, that's a lot to cover. There's a whole bunch more projects that anybody can go look up, but that's just, there's so much going on right now.
Well, I'm going to post the link to y'all's website. I love the idea of like, if you're interested in one of those, that someone can go watch the podcast and get an in-depth dive into that. But I will say, Doctor, as much as I love your partnerships with other universities, we won't hold that against you today. We do have Red Raider, Dr. Blake Grisham, on live watching. So he is from Tech. So neat to hear you talk about Texas Tech and have Dr. Grisham joining us. So good morning, Dr. Grisham.
Yeah, we've been working with Dr. Grisham. The Texas State chapter has actually super funded some of his work too. So yeah, we're awesome. Very supportive of him and his projects.
Wonderful. I love that the fact that there's multiple universities collaborating on this research, because we very much know as humans, we like our borders, and you can pretty well draw like lines as to where the colleges are in the what's the word I'm looking for, basically like you have your college that you root for, but the turkeys and other wildlife, they don't understand those boundaries. So I just think that's awesome that colleges are collaborating with each other, even across state lines.
Yeah, and that was a brief picture of all the projects that are going on across the country. There's a ton of research actually just going on in Texas, and Texas A&M, Texas Tech, University of North Texas. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but there's a ton of work going on in Texas as well.
Well, that's awesome. So let's dive into the actual turkeys. And I will have to completely declare that I am not a turkey expert. They're not one of my birds of passion. So let's talk about, if I was in the United States, let's talk about, how many turkeys I could see. Maybe which one is your favorite turkey subspecies, and a little bit about maybe one or two. Hit the highlights.
Yeah, so we have 5 wild turkey subspecies in the United States. We have the Osceola wild turkey in Florida, the eastern wild turkey that covers really the eastern half of the country, the Rio Grande that covers kind of the southern Great Plains, the Merriam's in the west, that they're like the mountain bird, and we have the Gould's wild turkey in New Mexico, Arizona, and Mexico. And so where you can find each of these subspecies is I already mentioned that, but Osceola is also called the Florida bird. They live in Florida only. Eastern wild turkey, they trickle into Texas, kind of go up to the Dakotas. We have the Rio Grande that's in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and New Mexico, and they're really living in that dry, arid kind of region. And then Merriam's in the mountains, and Gould's in they're in just a couple little pockets down in the desert, basically. My personal favorite, I think, is the Merriams because I like being in the mountains more than anything. And they're just a fun bird to chase, and they're beautiful. They have these really bright snow white tips on their tail fan, or their tail fans. And so I think that's my favorite. They're not as wily as the Eastern wild turkeys. And I don't know, everyone loves the Eastern, but I think Merriams are my favorite just because they're unique and I like being in the mountains. But the most common of all of those is going to be the Eastern wild turkey. They're actually found in 38 of the 50 states.
Wow.
And then also numerous Canadian provinces. They live in the eastern half. That's where their historic range is, but you can actually find them out in like the Pacific Northwest too, because they were transplanted there back in the day and they thrived. And so like Washington State has the Rios, Easterns, and Merriams. So it's kind of interesting that you can find Easterns in Washington, but it's also kind of unique too.
So in the Northwest then, since they translocate a lot of those, different subspecies, can you still tell the difference between the different subspecies, or have they been there long enough that they're kind of starting to like make their own little like special subspecies, I guess you could say?
Well, yeah, it's kind of hard. There can be overlap in subspecies, especially if you're at the edge of a subspecies range. And so we know that they will, I mean, they're the same species, so they're going to interbreed. So it's really hard to tell them apart. Really, the easiest way to tell a subspecies apart for me is the first question I always ask is, where did you see the bird, or where did you kill the bird? Because if I know the distribution of the subspecies, then it's going to be easier for me to say, oh, you were in Central Texas, then it was definitely a Rio. Oh, you were in East Texas, it was definitely an Eastern. But there's definitely that hybridization going on. And so I know there's some new genetic studies that are going on, and there's a lot of mutts out there, basically, especially in Washington.
Especially in Washington.
Yeah, depending on who you talk to,
I have funny jokes that I probably can't say on Cup Chat. All the jokes stay in the brain.
Okay, so you kind of touched on it. So there's really no, like, I'm sure if you had like each subspecies side by side, you could probably see like minute differences between the different subspecies. But if you just see a turkey out and about, you can't, other than their distribution or where you're at, you really can't tell a huge difference between.
Yeah, well, so in general, like the general rule of thumb is Eastern wild turkeys usually have that really deep chestnut brown tips on their tail feathers, and they're larger than some of the other subspecies. And so they have this really big, deep gobble too, and they can be elusive and kind of difficult to call in. Second only to the Osceola, which is the most difficult to call in, but the Osceola gets its name from its location, and they have the dark brown tail tips too. So if you're in South or Central Florida and you see a bird with dark brown tail tips, it's probably an Osceola because it's in Florida. Whereas if you see one in, South Georgia, it's probably an Eastern. There could be some intermingling there. It's hard to say. But so those two birds look very similar. Rio Grande is concentrated, in the western desert area. So if somebody says they saw a turkey in Central Texas, it was probably a Rio. They tend to have a little bit lighter colored tail tips on their feathers, where it's like a more tan color, but they can be a little bit more white. They can be a little bit darker. So it's hard to say on that. With the Merriams, they usually always have the really snow white tips on their tail feathers, and they can be smaller because they're little mountain birds. They have weaker gobbles and shorter legs and shorter beards and shorter spurs than the other subspecies. And so if you're in the Rocky Mountains and you see a turkey, it's probably a Merriam's. But there's still that range of variation in colors and whatnot that they can always have. And then if you see a Gould's, you're going to be in Arizona, New Mexico, or Mexico, because they don't exist anywhere else. But they're also pretty large, and they also have tan colored tail feather tips. So it depends is the answer. Is where are you and what does it look like?
So you can, but it's very challenging.
Right.
Now,
the main thing that I need to know is location of where you saw it, because that really helps.
Now, is there like a thing about like seeing all 5 turkey subspecies in the United States, like for birders or for hunters to get all 5?
Yeah, there's called the Grand Slam. Folks are always going out looking for their Grand Slam, which is 4 of the subspecies, not all of them except for the Goulds. And then there's the Super Slam. And so people are out there wanting to kill every subspecies that they can. So I actually have Merriam's in northwestern Nebraska, and that's where a lot of folks like to go to get their Merriam's because there's a lot of public land up there. So I get a lot of calls from folks saying, if I killed a bird in western Nebraska, does that mean I can count it as my Merriam's? Which, yes, you can.
Right. We talk about listing. It's all however you'd like to identify yourself. So you brought up hunting and the Grand Slams, and let's talk about a little bit about that. Let's talk about how y'all use that as a conservation strategy. Obviously, we usually have a community of birders, not necessarily hunter birders. So our birders usually like to see the birds. But let's talk about how hunting and how y'all use that as a conservation strategy, especially in the turkey populations.
Yeah, so wild turkeys are a game species, and they always have been. Everybody likes to kill a turkey and eat it. Thanksgiving and goes with the theme of the talk. So a lot of what we do is management based for wild game. So we are managing wild turkeys so that we can increase their population, so that we can manage them through hunting. So a lot of times in my job, I do a lot of work with the game commissions in all 4 of my states and regulations, and working on right now, at least, Texas has it for a lot of the state is a 4 bag limit. So people can go out and kill 4 wild turkeys, whereas in Oklahoma, they had a 3 tag limit, and they decreased it from 3 to 1 to address the population concerns. So there's a lot of, it's hard because there's a lot of private land in all of my states, and to manage private lands it's just not feasible when you're looking at such a big scale. So the state agencies, what they can impact at a larger scale is those kind of turkey regulations. I mean, they can manage their habitats on their wildlife management areas and whatnot, but that's such a small portion of the grand scheme of things and the landscape level. So regulation, turkey regulation management, and just habitat management are both critical for managing wild turkey populations.
And our population in Texas seeing the same decline that Oklahoma is, or where are we at on our population's scale?
So Texas is doing okay. There are some declines and some concerns in like the Rolling Plains area, Edwards Plateau area. And so that's where a lot of the research is actually being focused. The eastern wild turkeys, we're still doing eastern wild turkey restoration in East Texas, where we're bringing birds in from other states. And that kind of started back up in 2014 to address the declines that we were seeing in East Texas. So there's I can't say for certain. I think it's like 12 or 13 counties that are open in East Texas for hunting right now, because we are still doing that restoration. And so this past year we were getting birds from Maine and reintroducing them into the Sulphur River area, kind of up near Sulphur Springs. So there's still the eastern wild turkey restoration going on. We're still trying to do what we can to bring those populations back up. The Rio Grandes, in a lot of pockets, they're doing great. But there are some areas, with habitat fragmentation and the encroachment of large cities. Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex is just expanding every single day. So that's affecting quality habitat. So right now, Texas is doing okay, but we are monitoring it very closely. There's been some sharp declines we're seeing in Oklahoma and our neighbors. So we're kind of expecting it to happen in Texas too.
So you touched on like habitat fragmentation, loss of habitat. Are there any other factors that we know of that are causing these population declines, or is that sort of the major factor in all this?
Yeah, so there's this web kind of diagram that you can Google and find that shows all the different factors that affect wild turkey populations. And it is just this massive diagram of a million different factors. So habitat is a big one. Fragmentation, population of humans is spreading out. Everybody's subdividing their large properties. Just in general, habitat quality is declining. So that means the quality habitat for wild turkeys is not going to be there. But there's also a million other things like disease, weather is a big one, turkey regulations, predators, all kinds of different things that could be affected. Recruitment into the population, like poult survival, all those kind of things.
And all of that to me seems so intermingled as we talk about like habitat fragmentation, habitat loss. What was the other one? I don't remember. But a lot of that to me goes hand in hand as we look about, look at how everything is changing. And, when we fragment that land and, how, if we think about like turkey roosts and what they need at a turkey roost, if there was a turkey population that once lived in a subdivision, there's no then more good turkey roost typically in that kind of area. And so that's kind of we see our wild deer kind of thriving in those urban populations, but I would imagine urban turkeys would be pretty challenging, huh?
Yeah, you find them for sure. And a lot of times you'll find them around people's bird feeders and stuff like that. And so, out in the Pacific Northwest area, they're still having trouble with damaged birds. So like the wildlife damage services people are having to come out and trap birds and move them. And so a lot of times, like there's birds that are attacking school children getting off the bus and stuff. And so like they're still having that problem, which, at a certain point we did used to have that kind of problem. But since the populations have been declining, if you're seeing urban birds, it's because the populations are doing well enough that turkeys can spill out into the urban areas and they can thrive, but it's not the ideal habitat situation. And for Rio Grande wild turkeys, like you said, roosting is probably the single most limiting factor for Rio Grande wild turkeys. When they're living out there in the desert, they need these roosting areas because they're only going to sleep in the trees. And so that's usually around the riparian areas. So keeping riparian areas really healthy. And NWTF has a new initiative called Waterways for Wildlife, where we're looking at, it's 10 different states, Texas up to North Dakota, Montana down to New Mexico, where we're looking at only doing riparian projects so that we can help address that issue as well. So yeah, it's a tough balance.
Right. Well, we are nearing our 30-minute mark. We're going to try to really help ourselves stay to 30 minutes. Sometimes we get a little long-winded on here, Annie, just so you might know. Could happen. But anyways, so in our last few moments, can I tell us a little bit about if anyone wanted to be involved with the National Wild Turkey Federation? That's a long title. I would hate to have to write my deal out every time. So tell us a little bit, if people want to get involved, what's the best way to get involved? If they have questions about wild turkeys, what's their best go-to? Give us the good 30-second free commercial for the Wild Turkey Federation.
Yeah, well, just saying National Wild Turkey Federation takes up that full 30 seconds. But yeah, so you can become a member of the NWTF, get involved with NWTF, go to nwtf.org. We have local chapters all over the country. We have a bunch in Texas, and each state has a board of directors that allocates all these super funds that come from the hunting heritage banquets that these chapters are putting on. So there's a lot of involvement you can have. All these proceeds go towards mission-centric projects every year. You can also become a major donor. 86 cents of every dollar that's raised goes back to the ground towards the NWTF's mission. So if you're interested in learning more about wild turkeys in general, anyone can contact me, Annie Ferral, aferral@nwtf.net. Or we also have regional directors, which are the volunteer relations staff. And Texas has 2 regional directors right now. They're the ones that run the banquets, liaison with all the local and state chapters. So we have Erica and Amanda. They're fabulous. And they can get you connected with a local chapter or help you start a new chapter. We also have a lot of programs that are available for youth, women, and those that are physically disabled. So we have Jake's the youth program, we have the Women in the Outdoors, and we have Whalen Sportsmen. So there's all kinds of events like that across the country, and in Texas as well. So there's a lot of ways to get involved. And I think the first step would be to go to the NWTF website where you can find all this information.
Gotcha. Well, that is commented.
It's a great website.
It does look cool. I'm going to look. I want to watch some of the podcast. I'm really excited about that. So y'all look, I put that in the comments. Annie, it's been wonderful to have you. as we do our free 30-second commercials, here's my 30-second plug for everyone to go check out and register our virtual birding seminars coming up on November 22nd.
29th.
29th. I'm
November
going to put that
29th.
link in the comments so you can get all the information correctly. We are going to be exploring expanding ranges of our birds and the factors and what's contributing to those. And so that really is a neat deal where we are, we've got bring in these wildlife researchers and they're going to share their research and what they're learning from that. And the big thing for me as I've research on expanding ranges is that a lot of it is using our data from our citizen science and our eBird account. So y'all come on, check that out, join us. I'm going to put the link to the bottom. The best part is it's a $15 registration fee, and all the proceeds go back to supporting our youth birding programs, specifically Rio Diablo Birding Camp. So you're contributing to a great cause and getting an awesome educational experience. If you're a master naturalist, the advanced training hour request form has also been posted. So turn those into your chapters and get that educational moment approved, because expanding ranges affect us all, right, Lori? I was just thinking about you and all those chapters when we talked about master naturalist hours. So anyways, thank you all for joining us. Liz, any final thoughts?
No, I think you pretty well hit the nail on the head.
Well, thank you. I try.
Yeah, you did. You drank your coffee this morning, I guess.
I did drink my coffee, and that was an imperative start. Oh, thank you, Ruben, for already registering. We so appreciate it. So thank you, Annie, for joining us. I feel very Thanksgiving-y spirited, getting ready for Turkey Day. So
yeah, thank you guys so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone too.
Thank you. Y'all have a great Wednesday. Bye, everyone.